You guys have got to stop being so defensive about receiving feedback. I get it. Trust me, I get it. I was in competitive speech and debate for 6 years. I love to argue. I am famously always correct. And as a result, I understand intimately how it feels to receive feedback that you don't think is relevant to you, useful to you, or even good. I do not want to invalidate that making art and receiving feedback is incredibly personal and vulnerable. This is obviously not a blanket statement of all feedback is good. And when people are oppressing you or from an oppressive group who are giving you feedback that goes along with their privilege and lack of understanding of the wider world beyond their own shores, it's fine, actually. You should listen to them. That's not what we're doing here. But I do think that we could all serve to get a little bit better at receiving feedback and picking through what feedback is actually saying. And it will not only mean that we are getting more out of our feedback sessions, but we are also going to start receiving better feedback in the future. There will also be a future in receiving feedback, because why would anyone continue to give you notes if all you're going to do is yell at them about their bad opinions? So let's take this one step at a time. My first piece of advice for not getting quite so defensive about feedback is try not to pre-bias anyone. Now, I know Kelly had a great video last week about how you should definitely set people up with some expectations when you send them something for feedback, and I 100% agree. And I also think that there's room for nuance here. Basically, when I say don't pre-bias anyone, what I'm saying is don't set yourself up necessarily to receive feedback about things that you want honest reactions to. I know the characters are bad, but like, you know, do you like anything in this? All you're doing is telling people the characters are bad. And that might be true, and it also might not be. And what you're doing when you're giving people like this filter to see the work through, they're not given the chance to have a honest reaction to the characters in this case, to tell you what they honestly think, because you have already told them they're bad. So when people are told that something is bad, they look harder at it to try and validate the thing that somebody told them. A person who, by all rights, should have some level of authority over it because they created the characters. And all that's gonna do is make them hyper-focus on, oh yeah, the characters aren't very good, versus actually receiving it fine. That doesn't mean you shouldn't be prepared when you get to your feedback session with the things that you're concerned about, but it is oftentimes better to let people read something clear of expectation. And a lot of the times they won't mention anything about the thing that you're worried about because it's actually not a big problem and you are just hyper-focusing because, you know, you have more insight into this process than anyone else. Or they may find the thing that's actually wrong that would have nothing to do with the thing you would have told them ahead of time, because you wouldn't be asking for feedback if you had perfect insight into exactly what is or isn't wrong with this piece. Advice number 2, read everything, then take a walk. So this is obviously feedback for when somebody has like sent you notes via email or after class or something like that, where you have like things to read through privately. I definitely get this sort of like existential dread about having to read through feedback that people have given me, and it kind of spirals to the point where like I get totally ADHD avoidant about it, and that's not healthy and that's not productive. So what I've started to do, and what is honestly far more productive, is I take a deep breath, I read all of the feedback. I don't start trying to like implement anything. I literally just read all of it. If it's inline notes, I read all of those. If they've, you know, written me an editorial letter, I read that. I just read everything that somebody has given me about my work. And then I leave my desk. I take my dog to the park, I go get some coffee, and I just sit with it. Because a lot of the times the scary thing about feedback is not the feedback itself, but the anticipation of someone telling you that you're shit. Even if that's not true, even if the feedback is really constructive and you ultimately agree with it, usually our first emotional reaction to receiving criticism of any kind is defensiveness, because criticism means we were wrong, and we don't want to be wrong. We want to be right. Everyone wants to be right. Why would you say that I'm wrong? And that's not really a great like headspace to receive genuine critique with them. We're trying to strengthen our writing. We can't do that if we resist everyone's attempts to help us do that. Next piece of advice is to shut up. Now, it's funny, this is actually a section that Kelly and I went back and forth on a couple of times. When I first wrote this piece, I was very hardcore, do not talk during feedback unless it is absolutely necessary or like just a small clarification. But Kelly made some really great points about how a lot of the times the advice to not speak up for yourself during a feedback session is a form of like colonialist violence and is oftentimes putting marginalized writers on the wrong foot. And I totally understand and agree with that perspective. And I also think that we ultimately came to a place where perhaps shut up is not necessarily the right word, but maybe reframe it in the sense of, what do you want to spend your limited feedback time doing? Arguing with people about their feedback or hearing their feedback and having the opportunity to ask them some questions about it. So college was the first time that I ever experienced the like rule of you don't get to talk when other people are critiquing your work. And at first I was obviously very upset about this. I love talking, famously, but I learned to really appreciate the act of like not getting to defend myself right away, because what it did was mean that if people had questions about something that happened, if they were confused, if they were unsure, something like that, when people are going to read your work in the future, you're probably not sitting right next to them for them to ask you questions. So that's leaving your reader having to answer some questions themselves, and knowing what their conclusions are tells you a lot about how they're receiving the work and how they're understanding everything that's been said before. Hearing their conclusions tells you where the problem is, whether it's something that you need to fix, clarify, or perhaps lean into. There's sometimes an opportunity to be had in a place where you didn't think it was that confusing, but you're starting to get consistent feedback that people don't understand, and it may be an opportunity to make it even more mysterious and to lean into that aspect. But you don't get those insights if you are constantly talking, right? You don't get those insights when you are constantly chiming in, oh, well, that's not really what's happening here. Oh, well, you actually misunderstood. Actually, if you remember from 2 chapters ago, right? Like, that's all true, but is it helpful in this context to explain what people are wrong about, or to figure out how they missed the stuff that you thought was obvious? Listening to them tell you their thought process is going to tell you a lot more about what you actually need to fix versus the opportunity for you to defend yourself. That's not to say you can't defend yourself. And obviously, again, if people's comments are abusive or are just fully missing the point, that's fine, that's valid, but it is usually valuable, at least at the beginning of a feedback process, to listen more than you talk. But at the end of the day, it may be the case that this is the wrong feedback group for you or the wrong person to have sent your work to for feedback, and that's okay too. But in a lot of cases, if you spend your time arguing with people, you don't actually get to learn that their insights aren't very useful. You're just having an argument with somebody, and that's probably not the best way of ascertaining if this person is good for your writing or not, because now the problem has shifted. You have become the problem in this circumstance. And then you can't evaluate properly if maybe it is them that's the problem and the path of least resistance is perhaps healthiest for everyone. My final piece of advice on how to take feedback better is to look deeper. Now, this is a part of shut up, listen more than you talk, but it's also about leading with curiosity rather than defensiveness. That's really the big thing here. What I mean by that is that there comes a moment in every feedback process ever, whether it's written, whether it's in person, where somebody notices a problem, or they think they notice a problem, and they make a suggestion for how to fix that problem. It's a natural impulse, especially when you're talking to other creatives, but in feedback, this is particularly unhelpful because usually the suggestion is wrong. And the reason their suggestions are usually wrong is that it's not their thing. So the way that they would solve a problem is never going to jive completely with the thing that's actually being written. And it's much better when giving feedback, which we'll talk about next week, to not give suggestions unless asked, but it's gonna happen, right? It's an inevitability that people are gonna pitch on a problem that they think they see in your book. And your job is not to convince them that their suggestion is wrong. First of all, because it doesn't matter, right? Like it literally doesn't matter what the suggestion is. What matters is the fact that they felt the need to give you a suggestion here. I'm gonna give you an example. Let's say you get some feedback that says, I actually think that you should change your talking iguana character into a talking owl. The defensiveness, perhaps correct position that you might take is, why would it be an owl? An owl is a terrible suggestion. There's already a talking owl in the 3rd act that I don't wanna, foreshadow too much. And like the iguana is like a really important symbol for the story that I'm trying to write. Like, I'm sure there's a reason that you made it a talking iguana, and I'm sure you could articulate that reason to this other person, but that's not the point. Remember, the fact that they are making the suggestion is what's useful and interesting to you. So instead of getting defensive defensive and arguing with them about how their suggestion is bad, I want you to take a deep breath and a step back. And I want you to ask them the question, what is not working about the talking iguana for you? And why, if you were writing this story, would you make it an owl? What is the owl symbolizing for you? What problem does making the character an owl solve for you? Do you see the difference here? Because again, the suggestion itself is irrelevant, but the fact that they felt they needed to make a suggestion, that's what you should be curious about. As a reminder, the goal of a feedback session is not to be right. The goal of a feedback session is to learn what's not working and start to get insights on how to get it working. Like I mentioned, we're going to talk next week about how to give feedback better. And, you perhaps could passive aggressively send it to one of your feedback partners. However, I do think that there is an equal opportunity and responsibility of a writer who is receiving feedback to be an active participant as well, and to be conscious of the way that they are receiving feedback and processing and reacting to feedback that is going to make everyone's experience of this a lot more positive. So if you actually want to concretely get something out of your feedback sessions, you're going to need to approach them with a lot more curiosity and a lot less defensiveness. That's all I'm saying. As a reminder, we have the article version of this video, or a version of this video in article form in the description down below. So go ahead and check that out. Make sure to subscribe to the Rogue MFA on Substack. We post new articles and videos every Thursday. And we also have our writing accountability sessions here on YouTube every other Thursday. So if you just want to come to an inclusive place to generate new work and to talk about your challenges and to celebrate your wins, we hope to see you at the Rogue Writing Community Hour every other Thursday. Links for when those take place also in the description below, and I'll see you soon.